I took 5 steps toward the street, turned, withdrew my Charter Arms 38, and fired 5 shots into his back.
I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
What's scarier than a serial killer, a drug kingpin, or child killer parents, knowing they'll soon be back on the streets? These high-profile criminals have served their time, or at least a portion of it, and their scheduled release in 2025 is raising some serious concerns. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of their crimes, their sentences, and what their release could mean, because sometimes justice served isn't the same as justice done, and knowing their stories might just make you look over your shoulder a little more often.
How many murders were involved in those charges that you plea bargained? 7.
First up is Kenneth Alessio Bianchi, better known as the Hillside Strangler, along with his cousin Angelo Buono, who wreaked havoc in California during a terrifying killing spree between 1977 and 1979. This diabolical duo is responsible for the gruesome deaths of at least 12 young women and girls ages 12 to 28. Bianchi and Buono would cruise around Los Angeles in Buono's car, posing as undercover cops, tricking their victims into believing they were being arrested. Once the women were in their control, they would drive them to secluded areas where the horror would unfold. The victims were assaulted, tortured, and ultimately strangled. But Bianchi and Buono didn't stop there. The duo also experimented with other methods of killing, including lethal injections, electric shocks, and carbon monoxide poisoning. They were cold, calculating, and seemed to enjoy the fear they instilled in their victims. Despite the horrific acts they were committing, Bianchi even applied for a job with the Los Angeles Police Department and participated in several police ride-alongs, pretending to be part of the investigation into the Hillside Strangler case. Their reign of terror ended in January 1979 when Bianchi was caught after murdering 2 young women in Bellingham, Washington. The investigation quickly tied him to the murders in California, and his connection to Buono was discovered. Bianchi's attempts to avoid responsibility for his actions were chilling.
I would like to ask you, because we seek to understand killing and the reasons for it, if you have murdered anybody.
I really have no memory of having murdered anybody. Even to satisfy other person's allegations at one time, I attempted to think about what it might feel like, and I have never been able to do that.
He claimed to suffer from multiple personality disorder, inventing a fake alter ego, Steve Walker, to explain his behavior. However, expert psychiatrists soon saw through his deception, revealing that Bianchi had carefully studied psychology to fake the disorder. Under pressure, he eventually confessed to his crimes and agreed to testify against Buono in exchange for a more lenient sentence.
I have to take responsibility for what I've done, and I have to do everything I can to get Angelo Buono and to devote my entire life to do everything I possibly can to give my life.
Bianchi's testimony was a far cry from cooperation, as he tried to undermine his own involvement, but it ultimately led to Buono's conviction. Bianchi's life sentence began, but his story didn't end there. During his time in prison, he formed a relationship with a woman named Veronica Compton, who would later become embroiled in her own criminal scheme to free Bianchi. In a twisted attempt to make it seem like the Hillside Strangler was still on the loose, Compton tried to strangle a woman and frame Bianchi for the crime. She was caught and imprisoned. Bianchi, now serving life in prison at the Washington State Penitentiary, was denied parole in 2010. But keep an eye on him, because in 2025, Bianchi will be eligible to apply for parole again. It's a chilling thought, considering the brutal, calculated murders he committed, and the fact that he has yet to show genuine remorse.
I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess. It's far more than 35.
Now, meet Edmund Kemper, an absolute terror of a man who makes your run-of-the-mill criminal look like a saint. Kemper is an American serial killer who terrorized California in the 60s and 70s, with a string of murders so horrifying that even the most hardened detectives needed a moment. Or 5. This guy started young. At just 15 years old, he shot both his grandparents in cold blood, allegedly just to see what it felt like. A warm-up for the nightmares to come, apparently. He got shipped off to a psychiatric hospital, where doctors decided he was rehabilitated, and let him out at 21. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. Once free, Kemper's hobbies escalated quickly. Between 1972 and 1973, he hunted down 6 young women hitchhiking in Santa Cruz. Not content with just taking their lives, Kemper's crimes included dismemberment and making him not just a murderer, but a certified monster. But wait, there's more. His spree peaked in the murder of his own mother. That's right, he her to death with a claw hammer, her, and then used her. Not done yet. He invited his mom's best friend over and killed her too, just for good measure. And here's the wild part. This 6'9", literal giant of a man turned himself in, called up the police and confessed, like it was a casual chat over coffee.
He said it was time for the killing to stop. In his case, he said publicly that it was his mother that he was killing all along. And when he killed his mother, that was the end. It's a very deep psychological observation from himself.
When they asked why he did it, Kemper simply replied that he wanted the killing to stop, but couldn't trust himself to quit on his own. The co-ed killer, as the media dubbed him, is now serving 8 life sentences. But don't worry, he's still keeping busy. Apparently, he narrates audiobooks in prison. Imagine hearing that voice lulling you to sleep. He is up for parole in 2025, and we can only hope that he rots in his cell forever.
I took 5 steps toward the street, turned, withdrew my Charter Arms 38, and fired 5 shots into his back.
Mark Chapman. Next up is Chapman, the American criminal who murdered John Lennon, the famed English musician and former Beatle. On December 8, 1980, as Lennon returned to his residence at the Dakota in New York City, Chapman fired 5 shots from a .38 special revolver, striking Lennon 4 times in the back. Lennon was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. Chapman remained at the scene, reading J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, until police arrived to arrest him. Born on May 10, 1955 in Fort Worth, Texas, Chapman was initially a fan of the Beatles. However, he became envious with Lennon's lifestyle and statements, particularly his claim that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. In the months leading up to the murder, Chapman developed an obsession with The Catcher in the Rye, identifying with its protagonist, Holden Caulfield, and even considering himself the novel's character. Following his arrest, Chapman was charged with second-degree murder. Despite initial plans to plead insanity, he ultimately pleaded guilty, stating it was the will of God. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Since becoming eligible for parole in 2000, Chapman has been denied release multiple times, with his next hearing scheduled for August 2025. Chapman's crime has been the subject of various media portrayals, including the films The Killing of John Lennon, 2006, and Chapter 27, 2007.
The man faces murder charges for allegedly beating a 3-year-old boy to death.
Followed by Patrick Goodman, who is a convicted child killer and has been at the center of heated debate over his parole. Goodman was sentenced to 25 years to life for the brutal 2000 murder of his girlfriend's 3-year-old son, Elijah Sanderson, in San Francisco. The heinous crime shocked everyone, with the medical examiner describing it as one of the worst cases of child abuse ever seen. Elijah suffered over 50 external injuries, including a broken neck, ribs, a severed bowel, and renal artery. Goodman's actions robbed the young child of a chance to grow up. Despite the intensity of his crime, the state parole board approved his release during a December 2023 hearing, overturning a prior denial from 2022. The decision sparked outrage, particularly from District Attorney Brooke Jenkins, whose office argued that Goodman remains a danger to public safety. Goodman claims he has changed, stating he wants to prove he's no longer the monster he used to be. However, critics, including DA candidate Jonathan Hatami, argue that anyone capable of murdering a child poses an ongoing threat to society. They urge California Governor Gavin Newsom to overturn the parole board's decision. This case highlights a broader controversy surrounding the qualifications of parole board members and the justice system's handling of violent offenders. As of now, Goodman's fate rests in the governor's hands, with victims' advocates and officials pushing for justice for Elijah Sanderson.
You understand the loss of her to her fans.
It's tremendous, and not only to them, but to me.
But they want to know why you killed her.
I won't discuss that.
And now, let's dig into the disturbing case of Yolanda Saldivar. Saldivar is a convicted murderer currently serving a life sentence for the shocking killing of Tejano music superstar Selena Quintanilla, a real-life villain with a crazy backstory. Saldivar was once Selena's trusted fan club president and boutique manager. But this story takes a dark turn, one that nobody could have predicted. On March 31st, 1995, Saldivar lured Selena to a meeting at a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi, Texas. She claimed it was to discuss missing financial documents. What Selena didn't know was that Saldivar had a small caliber handgun and a sinister plan. At 11:50 a.m., an argument escalated, and Saldivar shot Selena in the back. The 23-year-old Grammy-winning singer managed to run to the hotel lobby, leaving a 392-foot-long trail of blood behind her.
What's wrong, man? We have a woman ran in the lobby, said she's been shot. She's laying on the floor and there's blood. Okay. Where are you? How old is she? She looks about 20. Okay, who's shot her? Where is it? She's in the lobby right now? Yes, ma'am. She just passed out. Okay.
She identified Saldivar as her shooter before collapsing. Selena tragically died of blood loss at 1:05 p.m. at Memorial Medical Center. And what did Saldivar do? She barricaded herself in her red pickup truck, holding a gun to her head for over 9 hours while negotiators tried to get her to surrender. She demanded nothing and eventually gave up, but not before traumatizing fans and onlookers alike. Saldivar had been embezzling money from Selena's fan club and boutiques and feared being exposed. Talk about a betrayal. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She's serving her time at the Mountain View unit in Texas, with parole eligibility starting in 2025.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home to us where they belong.
Next up is Susan Smith, a South Carolina mother who committed the unthinkable. On October 25, 1994, Smith falsely claimed her 2 young sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, were kidnapped by a carjacker. She told the police that an African-American man had hijacked her burgundy Mazda at gunpoint and driven off with the children strapped in their car seats. Her story unraveled into one of the most horrifying crimes in American history. Smith's initial pleas for help were tearful and public, as she begged for her son's safe return. However, inconsistencies in her narrative raised red flags with law enforcement. For instance, the traffic light where she claimed the carjacking occurred wasn't triggered unless another car was present, and no witnesses corroborate her story.
We've had sightings for the vehicle, we've had sightings supposedly of the children, we've had sightings of the vehicle and the children, we've had sightings that still put them together, we've had sightings that did not. Just a common type of information that you have to rule out everything you got.
Police investigations also revealed that Smith lied about visiting a friend that night. 9 days later, under mounting pressure, Susan confessed to murdering her children. She admitted to driving her car to John D. Long Lake, releasing the emergency brake, and letting the vehicle roll into the water with her son still inside. Divers later recovered the car from 18 feet of water, with Michael and Alex still strapped into their seats. Why would a mother commit such a heinous act? Investigators discovered that Smith had been romantically involved with Tom Finlay, a wealthy and successful man who reportedly didn't want children. A letter from Finlay highlighted this sentiment, providing a potential motive for Smith's actions. In 1995, Smith was convicted of murdering her sons. Prosecutors sought the death penalty.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander 14 months.
But she was sentenced to life in prison. Despite her sentence, Smith remains a controversial figure, penning letters from prison in which she insists she is not the monster society portrays her to be. She claims the murders were not premeditated and attributes her actions to a stating that she didn't want her children to grow up without a mother. John D. Long Lake, where this tragedy unfolded, became a site of morbid curiosity. Visitors left flowers in memory of the boys, but the lake's dark history deepened when 7 people, including children, accidentally drowned there in 1996 while visiting the memorial. Up for parole in 2025, Susan's fate is in the hands of the law enforcement agencies. As for you all, it's great to keep an eye out for these criminals, but we sincerely hope that none of you ever cross paths with a human even slightly as twisted as the ones we just saw. If you liked the video, feel free to check out much more on our channel. Keep the true crime binge on.